special guest, Justice Antonin Scalia, and his co-author Brian Garner. Let's turn to Roe v. Wade, because you, Justice Scalia, you had very strong opinions about this at the time. I know you do now. Why were you so violently opposed to it?
I wouldn't say violently. I'm a peaceful man. You mean adamantly opposed?
Adamantly.
Basically because the theory that was expounded to impose that decision was a theory that does not make any sense, and that is, namely, the theory of substantive due process. There's a due process clause in the Constitution which says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. That is obviously a guarantee, not of life, not of liberty, not of property. You can be deprived of all of them, but not without due process. My court, in recent years, has invented what is called substantive due process by simply saying some liberties are so important that no process would suffice to take them away. And that was the theory used in Roe versus Wade, and it's a theory that is simply a lie. The world is divided into substance and procedure.
So should abortion be illegal in your eyes?
Should it be illegal?
Yeah.
I don't have public views on what should be illegal and what shouldn't. I have public views on what the Constitution prohibits and what it doesn't prohibit.
But I mean, the Constitution, when they framed it, they didn't even allow women to have the right to vote. I mean, they gave women no rights.
Oh, come on. No rights?
Did they?
Of course. They were entitled to due process of law.
All kinds of rights.
You couldn't send them to prison without the same kind of a trial that a man would get.
Right, but again, it comes back to changing times. The founding fathers were never going to have any reason at that time to consider a woman's right to keep a baby or to have an abortion. It wouldn't have even entered their minds, would it?
I don't know why. Why wouldn't it?
Because at the time it was just...
They didn't have wives and daughters that they cared about?
They did, but it was not an issue that they would ever consider framing in the Constitution.
I don't know.
But when women began to take charge in the last century of their lives and their rights and so on, and began to fight for these, everybody believed that was the right thing to do, didn't they? I mean, why would you be instinctively against that?
My view is, regardless of whether you think prohibiting abortion is good or whether you think prohibiting abortion is bad, regardless of how you come out on that, my only point is the Constitution does not say anything about it. It leaves it up to democratic choice. Some states prohibited it, some states didn't. What Roe versus Wade said was that no state can prohibit it. That is simply not in the Constitution. It was one of those many things, most things in the world, left to democratic choice. And the court does not do democracy a favor when it takes an issue out of democratic choice simply because it thinks it should not be there.
How do you, as a conservative Catholic, how do you not bring your personal sense of what is right and wrong to that kind of decision? Because clearly, as a conservative Catholic, you're going to be fundamentally against abortion.
Just as the pro-choice people say the Constitution prohibits the banning of abortion, so also the pro-life people say the opposite. They say that the Constitution requires the banning of abortion because you're depriving someone of life without due process of law. I reject that argument just as I reject the other one. The Constitution, in fact, says nothing at all about the subject. It is left to democratic choice. Now, regardless of what my views as a Catholic are, the Constitution says nothing about it.
What has been your hardest decision, do you think?
My hardest?
Yeah.
You don't want to know.
I do want to know.
No, it's the dullest case imaginable. There is no necessary correlation between the difficulty of a decision and its importance. Some of the most insignificant cases have been the hardest. And
what has been the one that
it'd probably be a patent case. You want me to describe a really...
No, I don't.
Of course.
All right, what has been, in your view, the most contentious? What's the one that most people ask you about?
Contentious? Well, I guess the one that created most waves of disagreement was Bush versus Gore. Okay. That comes up all the time, and my usual response is get over it.
Get over the possible corrupting of the American presidential system? Justice Scalia?
Look at, my court didn't bring the case into the court. It was brought into the courts by Al Gore. He is the one who wanted courts to decide the question. You know, when Richard Nixon thought that he had lost the election because of chicanery in Chicago, he chose not to bring it into the courts. But Al Gore wanted the courts to decide it. So the only question in Bush versus Gore was whether the presidency would be decided by the Florida Supreme Court or by the United States Supreme Court. That was the only question, and that's not a hard one.
No regrets?
Oh, no regrets at all, especially since it's clear that the thing would have ended up the same way anyway. The press did extensive research into what would have happened if what Al Gore wanted done had been done county by county, and he would have lost anyway.
When people say about you that you're this fantastic justice, no one disputes that, and incredibly charismatic, and you ask the most questions. Apparently you get...
I don't ask the most questions.
No, apparently
I don't
you
ask the most. No, that's not true.
Apparently somebody has counted in the last 25 years.
No.
You are the guy that asks the most questions.
No, I used to be.
We ask more than Justice Thomas, right?
That's a low bar.
I mean, is it just me that thinks it's a bit weird that a guy can join the Supreme Court and literally not ask any questions?
No, that's not so unusual. Thurgood Marshall rarely asked a question. Bill Brennan rarely asked questions. No. In fact, a lot of them didn't ask. I was the first one who started asking a lot of questions. I appeared before the court once before I became a judge. I was serving in the Justice Department. And I got 2 questions the whole time of my argument. They both came from Byron White. It was not at all unusual for justices not to ask questions.
Let's take another break.
So leave Clarence alone.
In fairness to Justice Thomas, he has a principled reason. I mean, he told me in his interview, and this is all on the record, he does not ask questions because he thinks it's too cacophonous. There are too many questions as it is, and he doesn't want to add to the cacophony.
It's one way of looking at it. Let's take another break. Let's come back, and I want to get into you as a man. I want to know what makes you tick, what rocks your boat.
That's scary.
That's what I wanted it to be.
All right.
Back with Justice Scalia and Brian Garner, the co-author of his book. Get aside the kind of man you are. Are you a good colleague? How do you get on with your other Supreme Court justices? Because you're all highly intelligent, very opinionated people. Are there clashes there?
There are clashes on legal questions, but not personally. The press likes to paint us as, 9 scorpions in a bottle. We're all in. That's just not the case at all.
Well, the big buzz at the moment is that you and Justice Roberts have had a bit of a parting of the ways. You've gone from being best buddies to warring enemies.
Who told you that?
I think I read it in some of the papers.
You shouldn't believe...
Credible sources.
You should not believe what you read about the court in the newspapers, because the information has either been made up or given to the newspapers by somebody who is violating a confidence, which means that person is not reliable.
So you've had no falling out with Justice Roberts?
I'm not going to talk about... No, I haven't had a falling out with Justice Roberts.
Loud words exchanged?
No.
Slamming of doors?
No.
Nothing like that?
Nothing like that.
Best buddies?
My best buddy on the court is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, has always been.
Yeah. And yet you disagree with her about almost everything, I'm told.
Just about everything.
What do you like to do when you're not presiding in the Supreme Court?
I like to play tennis. And in my later years, since I'm circuit justice for the Fifth Circuit, I have gotten into hunting. So I do a lot of hunting of various animals.
You've been hunting with Dick Cheney, haven't you?
I have indeed.
What's that like? I mean, you live to tell the tale, which isn't always the case.
Dick Cheney is a very good wing shot.
Humans or animals?
Ducks.
You got into trouble over that because they said there was a potential conflict in something that you were presiding over. How carefully do you think, before you accept an invitation to go hunting with Dick Cheney, how hard do you think about that as a potential conflict?
Well, in that case, I had accepted the invitation long before the case that was the alleged source of the conflict was before the court. But, and that was nothing. Cheney was not personally the defendant. He was named because he was the head of the agency that was the defendant. And justices have never recused themselves because they are friends with the named head of an agency. And in fact, justices are friendly with a lot of heads of agencies and cabinet officers and whatnot. If we had to recuse ourselves every time one of our friends was named, even though his personal fortune was not at stake, we would not sit in a lot of cases. So that was a tempest in a teapot.
When people say you are overtly political with some of your decisions, which some people do, some critics do, how do you feel about that? Does that annoy you?
No, I usually don't read it.
Is this news to you?
Well, I think it's patently false. I mean, Justice Scalia has a record of deciding many cases that go against his personal predilections. The flag burning is just one example. But a good judge does that. A good judge will decide cases based on a governing text that go against what the judge may think is wise policy. Isn't that true?
Look, I have ruled against the government when Republicans were in the administration, and I've ruled for the government when Democrats were in the... I couldn't care less who the president is or what the administration is.
Do you think any of your colleagues acted from a politically motivated manner?
Not a single one of them.
I mean, I know you can't discuss anything in the last session, but a classic example, some would say, would be the healthcare thing.
I don't think any of my colleagues on any cases vote the way they do for political reasons. They vote the way they do because they have their own judicial philosophy, and they may have been selected by the Democrats because they have that particular philosophy, or they may have been selected by the Republicans because they have that particular judicial philosophy. But that is only to say that they are who they are, and they vote on the basis of what their own view of the law brings them to believe. Not at all, because the court is not at all a political institution. Not at all. Not a single one of my colleagues.
When you see Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, getting criticized for being political, for being partisan, does it offend you that his integrity would be questioned like that?
It offends me that that people point to the fact, and they didn't used to be able to when David Souter and John Paul Stevens were still on the court. They often voted with the appointees who were Democratic appointees, so that the 5-4 decisions was not always 5 Republican appointees versus 4 Democratic. Now that they're off, it often does turn that way. But that is not because they are voting their politics, not because they're voting for the Republicans or voting for the Democrats. It's because they have been selected by the Republicans or selected by the Democrats precisely because of their judicial philosophy. So it should be no surprise that the 5 appointed by the Republicans tend to have a certain judicial philosophy, and the 4 appointed by the Democrats tend to have a different one. I mean, that's what elections have been about for a long time.
When you lose a case, or a case goes against what you would like it to go, hey, what do? You go and have a few drinks, chill out, but can you turn it off? How do you deal with failure like that? Because these are big deals. You're a Supreme Court judge.
I'd probably mutter something under my breath or something, but no, I mean, that's you play the hand you're dealt. That's all, and you can't take it personally.
Let's take a final break. I want to come back and talk to you about family, because I know you're a huge family man. Okay. You've been married a very long time to a long-suffering woman, would you say?
I'd say so, yes.
I'll find out just how long-suffering in a moment. with Justice Scalia and Brian Garner, co-author of excellent book, Reading Law, The Interpretation of Legal Texts. Have you ever broken the law, Justice Scalia?
Have I ever broken the law?
Yeah.
I have exceeded the speed limit on occasion.
Ever been caught?
Oh yes, I've gotten tickets. None recently.
That's it? That's the only criminal action in your life?
I'm pretty much a law-abiding sort.
I like the phrase "pretty much." It gives me somewhere to go.
I'm a law-abiding sort.
What is your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure?
Yeah.
I don't have any guilty pleasure. How can it be pleasurable if it's guilty?
I've got lots of guilty pleasures.
No, you don't.
No, I do. Everyone does. Nothing you get up to that you probably wouldn't want to read
That
about.
I think I shouldn't do? Smoking?
Now, you've been married for how long?
52 years.
An amazing marriage, 9 children.
Yes.
How many grandchildren then?
33.
Amazing. What has been the secret of such a long-standing marriage, do you think?
Maureen made it very clear early on that if we split up, I would get the children. We
said before the break that possibly she was a long-suffering wife. Did you mean that?
She has worked very hard. I have not gone after the dollar for most of my life, so we didn't have a lot of money, and she didn't have a lot of help at home, and raising that many kids without a nanny or without, for many years, even any people to help with the housework was hard. She worked very hard.
And I ask this of all my guests, and I don't see why you should get away with not answering it. How many times have you been properly in love in your life?
Properly in love? Oh, I think Maureen's it.
You struck gold.
Oh, yeah.
Will you ever retire?
Of course I'll retire. Certainly I'll retire when I think I'm not doing as good a job as I used to. That will make me feel very bad.
And as we sit here now, what would you say your greatest achievement has been as a Supreme Court Justice? Wow.
I think, despite the fact that not everybody agrees with it, I think the court pays more attention to text than it used to when I first came on the court, and I like to think that I've had something to do with that. I think that the court uses much less legislative history than it used to in the past. In the 80s, 2/3 of the opinion would be discussion of the debates on the floor and the committee reports, and that doesn't happen anymore. If you want to talk about individual...
I mean, on that point, on the legislative history point, again, critics would say to you, well, hang on a sec, because you're such a constitutionalist and always go back to the way they framed the Constitution and so on. They debated all that. I mean, that is, in its way, legislative history, isn't it?
What is?
The framing of the Constitution, the framing of amendments and so on. What's the difference, really?
I don't use the Madison's notes as authoritative on the meaning of the Constitution. I don't use that. I use the Federalist Papers, but not because they were, the writers of the Federalist Papers were present. One of them wasn't. John Jay was not present at the framing. I use them because they were intelligent people of the time, and therefore what they thought this language meant was likely what it meant.
Why do you have such faith in those politicians of that time? You know, I mean, these days, if the current crop of politicians created some new constitution, people wouldn't have the faith, the unburning, unflinching faith that you do. Why are you so convinced that these guys, over 200 years ago, were so right?
You have to read the Federalist Papers to answer that question. I don't think anybody in the current Congress could write even one of those numbers. These men were very, very thoughtful. I truly believe that there are times in history when genius bursts forth at some part of the globe, you know, like 2000 BC in Athens or Quinquecento Florence for art. And I think one of those places was 18th century America for political science. You know, what Madison said that he told the people assembled at the convention, gentlemen, we are engaged in the new science of government. Nobody had ever tried to design a government scientifically before. They were brilliant men, and
do you wish we had a few of them now?
I wish we had a few of them now, and I certainly do not favor tinkering with what they put together.
Justice Scalia, it's been fascinating.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking
Thank you very much
with
for
you.
your time.
Thank
Brian,
you.
Congratulations. It's an amazing book. Anyone that has just listened to that will want to go and read it. It is a weighty tome. It's full of humour, as the interview has been, and I think it'll give people really a much better understanding of what you're about. And I think you've helped bring that out, Brian, so I applaud you both. May you sell many books.
Thank you.
And continue to preside for a very long time.
Thank you,
It
sir.
will be a lot less colourful without you. After the break, and only in America special, Justice Scalia takes me on a tour of the Supreme Court and names his favourite American president ever and his favourite Italian pasta dish. Tonight, only in America, Justice Scalia takes me on a walk and talk tour of the Supreme Court, and we talk presidents and pasta. So we're now in the bowels of the Supreme Court.
Bowels? Do you have to put it that way?
Do you still get a little thrill when you come in?
No, I've gotten used to it by now. It's a nice place to work.
Who's been the most impressive president for you personally?
Most, what, in history?
No, for, well,
in my lifetime?
in your
or
lifetime,
what?
yeah.
Well, I guess Ronald Reagan. I mean, I'd be an ingrate if I didn't say Ronald Reagan.
What made him special, do you think?
He had a way of, he was the great communicator. He had a real way of making important and complex ideas comprehensible to the people.
Did he give you any advice when he put you forward?
No.
Did he make any requests?
No.
Did he say anything?
No.
Did you tell me if you had?
He almost got my name right. when we went out to the press room in the White House, and one of Reagan's aides says to me, "Well, we think he'll get Scalia right, but we don't know about Antonin." And sure enough, I think he messed up Antonin.
Because you were the first Italian. I mean, I know you're Italian-American.
Yeah.
You're the first Italian to ever get to the Supreme Court. Quite a moment.
Yeah. It was a big deal for the Italians. I got an enormous amount of mail afterwards because, you know, they have this.
Do you ever have to pay for a bowl of spaghetti bolognese in New York?
I have a lot of Italian friends.
When I put questions out on Twitter, of all the serious ones, one popped out, which was, what is his favourite pasta dish?
My favorite pasta dish. There is.
Your wife does amazing macaroni.
She does. She has really learned to cook very well. But if I had to pick a favorite, there is a Sicilian dish with sardines and fennel.
Nice.
You can buy it in a yellow can, and it's
what do you call it?
Good.
Sardines and fennel.
Pasta con sarde, I think, is the name of it. So. I like that.
I would have spaghetti bolognese as my last meal.
Bolognese is good.
If you ever sentence me to death, that'll be my last meal.
Okay, not a bad way to go.